From shameless promotional shovelware to lazy budget ripoffs, not even the greatest consoles of all time are safe from the age-old curse known as the shitty video game. And since I've already talked a lot about PSP games here, figured it was high time I finally explore some of its worst offerings. So let's just jump into it here and take a look at the PSP's worst rated games of all time and see if they really are that terrible. The Dragon Ball series has seen a metric ass ton of games released over the years, from RPGs to platformers, but the ones that seem to be the most popular in the fanbase are of course the fighting games, especially from the PS2 era. But how would its PSP spin-off fare in comparison? I'll start by saying, other than watching a few rerun episodes on YTV back in the day, and that meme from like 2010, I'll admit I don't know much about Dragon Ball, so the plot and characters are mostly going to be lost on me here, which is probably okay, because people say it's pretty shit anyways. The story starts off with Goku beating the absolute piss out of his grandpa. Pretty strong start in my book. The plot follows a young Goku on his adventure to collect all 7 Dragon Balls to keep them out of the hands of evil and save the world from destruction. Am I missing some plot details? Yeah, probably, but that's the gist of it. Other than a few in-game action scenes, the story is mostly told through still images and text boxes, which is fine and all, but I mean, come on, it's 2009, they could have at least had some voiceover here. You go through and engage in individual battles with various evil characters in the series until the final boss. Yeah, that's about it, and it only lasts about an hour or two. The arcade mode is essentially the same thing minus the dialogue scenes, same enemies, same environments, and same fighting. Speaking of which, the fighting system in this game has the mechanical depth of a kiddie pool. Now I'm not well versed in fighting games either, but I've played enough Mortal Kombat and Fatal Fury to know that mashing buttons is usually a part of it, but strategy is also required for knowing each fighter and combos. DBZ Evolution has the button mashing thing down pat, but basically throws everything else out the window. I had no idea what any of the face buttons did when I first played this game, and honestly I still don't think I do. I just found the quickest attack and kept smashing the button until the fight was over. That's pretty much all that's really required here, and the more powerful attacks aren't even really worth using because just repeating the same basic one over and over again works just fine. There's only like 10 characters in the game too, most of which perform exactly the same aside from their power attacks, which, well, you won't see much considering how easy everything else is. Each 2-round fight lasts about 2 to 3 minutes, so you can blast through most of this game's content in like half an hour. The biggest issue here is that the game was based on the 2009 live-action film of the same name, and even me, knowing the square root of shit all about this series, could easily take one look at the cover and tell you it was probably pretty bad. And guess what? I was right. The fan base absolutely tore it apart, and it was obvious this game was just designed to be a quick promotional cash grab for the movie. That being said, it works, it just doesn't have much to offer, and even the small amount of content it does feature is repetitive and mostly just a lazy copy-paste of the previous PS2 games that were a lot better overall. But you know what? There's nothing that grinds my gamer gears more than shameless promotional shovelware, and that's basically what this thing is. So therefore, Dragon Ball Evolution is in fact a pretty bad game, based on a pretty bad movie. The 2000s and extreme sports practically went together like bread and butter. Skateboarding was cool, freestyle motocross was coming into its own, and it was only a matter of time before it spilt over into gaming. Tony Hawk, MX vs ATV, you know the drill. They were popular just because of how cool it was back then, and, well, you gotta admit, Tony Hawk, Matt Hoffman, Travis Pastrana, I mean, come on, it was pretty damn awesome. Well, let's just say Dave Mirra BMX Challenge wasn't exactly considered one of the greats of the PSP era. I mean, Davey Boy's freestyle BMX games did pretty well, so what the hell happened here? Well, jumping in, you get the standard modes to choose from like Quick Play, Career, and Exhibition. Figured I'd hop into Quick Play first to get my bearings a bit, and yeah, they really did mean it when they said Quick Play. No map, mode, or options to choose from, it just straight up drops you into a random race. It's a pretty standard free-for-all. Hold X to pedal, analog to steer, and first to the finish wins. Of course you can do tricks too, but there's pretty much 0 point of doing so in the races. There's really no obstacles on any of the maps, and score doesn't matter at all for placement. Honestly, I'd usually just end up eating shit every time I tried to pull a trick anyways. The races in this game did confuse me a bit at first though. They don't work in laps around a track like you'd expect. Instead, the maps are split into 2 different circuits where you start by looping around the first one a few times and then the circuit moves over to the new area. It sounds like kind of a cool idea, but it also does just feel like two smaller races combined into one. Coupled with the fact that the AI opponents are so easy, they might as well not even be there. It's not like they're stupid either. They ride normally, they don't crash or make mistakes. They're just handicapped and move at like half the speed of your character. I actually ended up lapping them a few times over. Just doesn't exactly make the races all that interesting. Moving over to career mode, it's the same deal with races, but there's also modes for completing tricks and time-based objectives. You can create and customize your own character, but since the game doesn't actually have a story, cutscenes, or anything like that, there's really no interaction with them. The career mode is pretty much just a series of different tracks and challenges with nothing tying them together. And that's fine and all, but that isn't really a career mode, is it? The trick competitions are kind of the same deal, competing for a high score and all that. The problem is that there isn't really much in the way of tricks to actually do. You can bunny hop, grind on rails, and jump gaps, but other than what looks like a bar spin, I honestly couldn't find anything else to do. The game is okay, it just feels pretty meh. Looking more into it, I figured that the original developer ended up basically collapsing during the game's creation and kind of went into limbo for a few years. Until another company picked it up and basically kicked it out the window in 2006, and yeah, it really does show. The game recycles content designs from the earlier BMX freestyle games, just with less to actually offer. Overall, it's just a bit cheap feeling, I guess. So is Dave Mirra BMX Challenge really that bad? Honestly, nah, it's not. The game is certainly playable, but other than the fact that it's one of the only BMX games on the PSP, it just doesn't have anything that makes it stand out. So unless you're really craving some BMX action on the PSP, I'd just say go play some Underground 2 Remix instead. The Air Conflict series was a trilogy of PC combat flight sim games based on real conflicts throughout history, like Vietnam and the Second World War. In 2009, the PSP got Aces of World War II, which was a sequel/spin-off to the first Air Conflicts game released in 2006, featuring 13 campaigns with 240 missions, a total of 80 historically accurate World War II planes, and even support for multiplayer. And I gotta admit, that's kind of an impressive amount of content for the PSP. The question is, how do you take all that and get it working on something like the PSP? I mean, flight sims are usually known for having some complex controls and big open world maps, two things that weren't really that plausible on a 2004 handheld. I won't lie, I did not have high hopes for it in the beginning just based on that, but I was actually pretty surprised with this one once I started playing. So after picking a creative name for my pilot and choosing to be part of World War II's strongest air force, it was time to head off and start my training. The first few missions cover the basics like taking off, engaging in dogfights, and doing some bombing runs on ground targets. The controls were surprisingly easy to get the hang of. Once you take off, the plane basically flies itself while you steer with the analog stick and use weapons with the face buttons. No complaints here really. I actually managed to figure out most of them within a few minutes by trial and error. So after taking down a few planes and completely missing my first bombing run, I had to return back to base to rearm. Yeah, I haven't really gotten the hang of the whole landing thing, but I'll worry about that later. After receiving just about as much training as the average Soviet pilot would have gotten back then, it was time to start with the actual missions. Now there's a couple of different objectives in this game you'll be doing, like patrolling an area and flying through waypoints, avoiding detection, eliminating other planes, bombing missions, you get the idea. And yeah, sorry to get your hopes up here, but I'm not actually going to be playing through all 240 of these. They are all more or less the same type of objectives, just in different locations. After some basic recon patrols in Russia and Finland, I moved on to a mission in Poland. Wait, are those US vehicles? Yeah, I'm a Red Army pilot bombing US armor during the invasion of Poland. What the hell is going on? Overall, the gameplay is pretty good, the controls are simple enough, and the graphics look fine for the PSP, especially considering the type of game it is. Sometimes it would start to stutter or drop frames for a few seconds at random, and did have some longer load times, which were both common complaints about the game, but I didn't really consider it to ruin the experience. At this point, I was confused as to how it earned such a poor rating. I mean, I really couldn't find anything glaringly bad about this one, so I looked a bit deeper into what people had to say about the game, and of the small handful of reviews, most of them don't even elaborate much on what they thought made the game so bad in the first place. From what I could find, players, on the other hand, actually thought it was pretty good. So I think the low review score can mostly be blamed on the fact of how little coverage this game actually had. So is Air Conflict's Aces of World War II that bad? Honestly, no, not at all. And that's coming from somebody who has little experience or interest in flight sim games. Yeah, it's not exactly greatest hits material, but of all the games here, I actually had the most fun with this one by far. So I would say that Aces of World War II is not a bad game. In fact, I'd actually say it's pretty decent overall, and I'd recommend trying it out, because it's surprisingly fun to play around with for a bit. To start off, I've gone through the trouble of compiling an extensive list of people that actually asked for a Napoleon Dynamite themed video game. Yeah, it's still a work in progress. While it isn't exactly the pinnacle of modern day film or anything like that, you can't deny it is a pretty iconic indie movie. Strange, awkward, and downright funny most of the time, developing its own sort of cult following over the years for those very reasons. But like most films or shows that generated some sort of buzz in the mid-2000s, it had to get a video game tie-in of some sort to capitalize. So we got Napoleon Dynamite the game in 2008 on the PSP and the DS. I'm probably not alone in saying it's kinda hard to imagine making a movie like this into a game, so I really had no idea what to expect. Well, we start off with Napoleon waking up and turning on the TV, where we get to practice some of his sweet moves with a little rhythm game and some groovy music. Okay, so that's done. I got a bronze medal. Pretty straightforward. Ah yeah, it's another one of those mini-game games. A bundle of run-of-the-mill side content, with each one usually being based around a scene in the film. Obviously there's no plot, not that I'd really care. You just need to progress through each minigame to unlock the next one, getting some dialogue in between that sets up the background for what's to come next. Alright, fair enough. Next up, we've got to feed that fat lard Tina some dinner. You just whip food over the fence and try to avoid any incoming llama spit, which I found didn't really damage me half the time, so I just sat in front of the fence and started launching food at Tina until the minigame decided I'd done it enough. Yeah, gold medal, nice. Now Uncle Rico challenges me to a football throwing competition. Do I really need to go on here? I obviously got my ass kicked. I think I'll at least give some credit here for the cutout animation style, which I think fits the movie's strange, sort of dated aesthetic and looks decent enough for the PSP, but other than that, it's hard to say much great about it. You just play through a selection of these generic mini-games to earn medals. You can also unlock certain little collectibles that are just small references to the film with no real purpose. So, is Napoleon Dynamite the game that bad? Now this one got me thinking a bit. Like, am I judging these games based on their content or their functionality as a game? Because I guess the game is fine, it plays like it should, it's not horrendously broken or anything, but just like DBZ Evolution, it's obviously just another low-budget game with the express purpose of promoting a film rather than actually providing something fun and unique, you know, like a game should. And for that reason, I feel like I have to say that Napoleon Dynamite the game is kinda bad. It works, it's just not fun. And I can't believe I spent my time playing this game when I could have been chatting online with babes all day. Legend of the Dragon is yet another fighting game, this time based around the animated series of the same name that ran from 2005 to 2008. Much like my relationship with Dragon Ball, I'm not familiar with this series, but I think it's more acceptable here because, well, who the hell knows about Legend of the Dragon nowadays? Anyways, this is the only game that was released for the IP in 2007, with versions for the Wii, PS2, and PSP, all developed by Nico Entertainment. You know, the legends behind Garfield's Lasagna World Tour. Yeah, all the versions pretty much fared the same in terms of reviews, so this one looks pretty promising. The game follows the same plot as the show does, with the main character, Ong, inheriting the power of the Golden Dragon. In order to become more powerful, he travels to a handful of Zodiac shrines, each having a guardian to fight and a challenge to complete. You navigate from place to place on an overworld map where you can discover the shrines and sometimes run into battles in between. Like Dragonball Evolution, this game is also told entirely through still shots and text boxes. It's almost like they forgot that there was an entire animated series they could have pulled from for that, but hey. The story itself is short. There's around 12 unique battles in total with different characters, and I use the term unique very loosely here because other than looking different, they perform almost entirely the same. The main story can easily be beaten in a 1 to 2 hour sitting, and after that, the only thing the game really has to offer is the usual arcade and versus modes, which again are the same one-on-one fights, just without the story. I would talk about the fighting, but honestly I'd just be repeating pretty much exactly what I already said about Dragon Ball Evolution. In fact, most of what I could say about that game would apply here too. Although, Legend of the Dragon somehow manages to make the button mashing problem even worse, because here, repeating the same attack over and over again is even more effective. I mean, at least in Dragon Ball your opponent would sometimes counter or dodge, but since there's no energy value to worry about here, you just keep attacking and don't have to stop. At least its art style does try to maintain something close to the animated style of the TV series, and it looks fine enough, I guess. Another thing I did notice about this one is that it has some of the worst audio quality I have ever heard in a PSP game. Yeah, audio compression was common for the PSP, but I swear every piece of audio in this game sounds like it has been compressed to hell and back. When it comes to Legend of the Dragon, there isn't really a whole lot more to say about it that I didn't already mention about DBZ Evolution, except the fact that it was based on a pretty average animated show and not some garbage movie. At the end of the day, I'm not going to recommend this one. It's just another lazy, generic fighting game that doesn't do anything particularly interesting. It just happens to use the theme from this mid-2000s show as its backdrop, and since I doubt anybody here is a fan of that, I don't think you're missing out on a whole lot. So those were some of the worst rated PSP games of all time, according to Metacritic, and while I can confirm some of these were kinda bad, it turns out that it may not be the case for all of them. I try to read all the comments on my videos, so let me know what you think the worst PSP game of all time is. I'm always curious to hear opinions on that sort of stuff. As always, hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, and stay tuned.